Thank you so much for tuning in today for AMASIAN's Learning Series podcast. Our mission here is to empower our community through education and fostering some meaningful conversations. Today we're joined by Huma Ahsan, and Huma is running for Dane County Circuit Court judge. She's currently an immigration attorney in the Madison area, and today we're going to talk about how the role of a judge has a really very powerful impact, not just on the community at large, but on ourselves and our neighbors, the people that we see every day. Now, our power, our choice to exercise the right to choose the person in this role is a way that our voice can be heard in a really direct way that provides change on a greater level than I think some of us even appreciate. And so my hope today is that if you weren't previously excited about local elections, maybe this won't quite get you there, but it'll be a start. Now, there are some technical things that come up in this interview, so just a very brief and general overview of, the legal background of things. The circuit court is our trial court. It's where lawsuits are filed and trials are heard, of course. And sometimes the decisions that are made at these courts are heard by higher courts like the Court of Appeals or sometimes even the Supreme Court. That's our judiciary branch, and that is one part of our system of checks and balances. And then, of course, we have our legislative branch, our Congress. They write the statutes, they enact things like the criminal code and laws that govern divorce cases, eviction cases. And those are the laws that the court then puts into play and applies to the cases it hears. Then, of course, we do have the executive branch at the state level. It's our governor. At the federal level, it's our president. But today, what we want to focus on is specifically the circuit court. What can it do for us? And why is it important for us to vote in this upcoming election and also just local elections at large? We're very excited that you could join us today. And without further ado, meet Huma Ahsan. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
We were talking earlier, and I was asking you, the people who love you the most, how would they describe you? And you said something that I really loved, which was
that the campaign slogan is authentic, fair, and fearless, and that's the campaign slogan. And it's all developed. My campaign is all grassroots. It's developed by me and 6 moms that I know, because we wanted to make change. And one of them works in communication, one of my good friends. And she's like, if I had to describe you, that's how I would describe you. Authentic, fair, and fearless. And I was like, fearless? Are you authentic? Okay, yeah, sure. Fair? Yeah, I'm fair. Fearless? I don't know. I have a lot of fear. He's like, no, the things that you've done are really amazing. And I'm like, okay, all right, let's go with it. I mean, I don't think of myself as fearless. I just think of myself as a mom that's trying to be a decent human being in this world that's like very chaotic, that we see now, and trying to make sure that there's something left for our kids.
And you grew up in Stevens Point, is that right?
Actually, my dad immigrated here in the middle 60s. He was an international student. He came as he was studying his PhD. He did aerial mapping, satellite cartography. I don't know what that is, to be honest. But anyway, so he worked for NASA, and then he got his first job at Stevens Point. And then my mom came there. They had an arranged marriage. So my mom came there, and unlike my dad, she didn't speak English, and they lived behind the Piggly Wiggly. And that's what she always says, like, take me to the Piggly Wiggly in Stevens Point. I'm like, I don't know where the Piggly Wiggly in Stevens Point is, but they lived behind there in apartments. And then she learned English at the tech school. And then after that, my dad at Stevens Point in the mid 60s, it was very difficult for minority professors to get tenure. And so Western Kentucky came along and said, if you come to Bowling Green, Kentucky in 1967, we will give you automatic tenure on day one. So my dad came there, and I was born in 72. So I was born in Bowling Green, Kentucky, and I grew up in Bowling Green, Kentucky. It's a town about, at that time, it was like 25,000, you know? So it was very, I was probably the diversity in the room, you know?
Yeah.
You know, I was probably the other, you know, if you think about it, you know, you had probably mostly a majority of white population, maybe 2 or 3 African-American students, and then other, you know, I don't know what, you know, everything else.
5-6% other. And
that's that's everything else. You know, I remember like when I was a kid, one of the African-American students came and he said like, "What are you?" You know, she's like, and I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Are you black?" I'm like, he's like, "Are you white? Are you like, what are you?" And I'm like, "I don't know." I was like 6. I was like, "Oh."
Yeah, how do you even think of how to answer that?
Yeah, I was like, I don't know.
So living in this community that doesn't sound like it necessarily even understood who you were as a demographic, I mean, that can't have been easy for you.
It wasn't very easy. I grew up, I was born in 72, so I went to school probably more in the late 70s and the 80s. So at that time, if you think about that time, most of the movies and the things that are out there, you know, my background is I'm a Muslim American. So most of the people that are portrayed as the villains were me. So, you know, like you think about like the Rambo movies, you know, it's always the terrorist that is blowing up something. So it's always like someone like me. And I'm like, but wait, I want to be Rambo. You know, I want to be the, you know, like, and back in the day you had LA Law, you know, at the time with, you know, most of the lawyers were white, you know? So it's always this dichotomy when we're the other and we're like, wait, I want to be the cowboy, but we're always thought of as the Indians, you know? You know, that kind of demographic. So I know growing up, I was always thought of as the terrorist. You know, in Southern Kentucky, it wasn't easy. I was called a lot of things, a lot of negative things growing up. I had my hair caught on fire by a boy.
On purpose?
I don't know. I think he just thought that this was okay because he didn't have enough. I mean, his parents, like I am the other. I am scary. You know, I am not part of the narrative. I am, you know, religiously, like, you know, in Southern Kentucky, it is a religious white area. And, you know, growing up Muslim and, you know, ethnically diverse, you know, in Asian, there was very isolating. So I think for some people, when they looked at me, they thought it was okay because they see this stuff on TV, you know, you see stuff like Rambo, you see people, you know, the terrorist, you know, America wins and that terrorist, we put them down. So I think for a lot of people, you know, growing up, I was the first like diverse person that they met, you know, and for me, being that diverse person, I didn't think I was diverse. I thought I was just like everybody else, but apparently I wasn't, you know, and it takes a while, you know, growing up in these situations to realize, you know, how to respond to that when you're so isolated, you know, and I think, you know, for some people, they end up feeling sympathy and wanting to just be part of that situation, like just deny their ethnicity. But for me, I became more compassionate to anybody who was the other. But you know, I watched LA Law, and for some reason I thought I could be a lawyer. You know, I want to be a lawyer. And I was like, a lawyer? We have no lawyers in our family. You know, you can be a doctor. You know, you can be an engineer. You can be you know, something else, but a lawyer, you know. So anyway, but I grew up having this sympathy for, you know, the other, you know, and in Southern Kentucky, there was a culture of, like, for example, there was the KKK when I grew up. So in Bowling Green. They were planning to march on the Capitol, on our Capitol, and in college, I went to Western Kentucky because I got the faculty scholarship, so it was like half off. So, you know, Asian dad was like, "You're going here, half off." you know? So I went to the college in Bowling Green, Western Kentucky. But they were going to march on the Capitol and the college. And so I was a journalism student at the time. And I wrote articles. I participated. We organized a protest. We did nonviolence training. So all of that led to that social work, sort of social, like taking care of the people that are the other, you know? And I think that led me into law school, you know?
Yeah.
And that's where I think my desire to be a lawyer came about, is that feeling of being the other, being picked on, being like, you know, told that, you know, there's really not much for you here.
Where was it that you went to law school?
I went to law school at Stetson College of Law in St. Petersburg, Florida, because it was on the beach. And I was 23. You know, I mean, where else would I go?
So you lived in Bowling Green, Kentucky.
Yes.
And went through so much there. You
Yeah.
went to law school in Florida. What brought you to Madison and building your practice here?
Yeah. So then I met my husband, and he was an international student. So part of his immigration story is that he's a physician, but since he was an international student, he had a choice to we have a choice that we're getting married, so we could either go to Pakistan for 2 years, or we could go to North Dakota, or we had to go to a rural, underserved area where he would practice. So we ended up in North Dakota, where he got his job. And that's where I ended up beginning my career after law school at Legal Assistance of North Dakota, being a legal aid attorney. You know,
He had to move somewhere with these underserved populations.
Yes.
So that's the population you started your career.
yes, that's where I
representing.
started. You know, there, because it was either there or Pakistan. And
Right.
so anyway, so we ended up in North Dakota, and I started my career at Legal Assistance of North Dakota, and there I worked for people who are underserved, mostly people who they had to fit a certain fit a certain income bracket, you know, for legal in order for us to serve them for legal assistance. We did divorces, we did custodies. I did a lot of work with domestic violence victims there. I did a lot of work with people who were facing housing issues.
You know, what are some of the biggest accomplishments? You know, pick two of your biggest accomplishments as counsel in North Dakota.
Well, I think one of them working as a legal aid attorney would be the Minot mobile home case. You know, it was a big case. It was one of my first cases out of law school, and it was really exciting. Calls because there are 5 mobile home parks in Minot. An out-of-state corporation came in and bought 3 of those mobile home parks, okay? They were asking, and they were sending out notices to all of the tenants saying that we're going to increase your rent, we're going to increase your deposits. Now, your deposits, which is really like, you know, if you think about it, that's like, why would you already have the deposit. You're not starting a new lease agreement, so how can you raise a deposit in the middle of a lease term?
So
yeah.
3 mobile home parks, and these are people's homes. How many people are being affected by this?
It was quite a bit, you know, but when you think of legal aid, one of the things with legal aid in the 80s, there was a provision, like legal aid used to sue Ronald Reagan up and down California all the time. So then when Ronald Reagan came in, he put in a provision that said legal aid can no longer do class action lawsuits. So I was looking at this because we were having like call after call after call after call, like, you know, on this. And I was like, okay. So I researched the statutes that talked about legal aid. And there is a specific exemption for legal aid lawyers. And if you're a legal aid lawyer, this is great. I don't know if it still applies, but you should definitely do this. But there is a specific exemption that says legal aid attorneys can represent organizations as long as 50% of that organization fits within the eligibility criteria for legal aid. So then that was like, okay, we can do something. So then I went around to the 3 different mobile home parks and I started organizing, started knocking on doors, you know, like, hey, do you have this thing? He's like, yes, you know, and I signed up people and I signed up over 300 clients. And I formed the Minot Mobile Home Association. That was an association that was legal aid, that all qualified for legal aid services. And then we sued the out-of-state corporation. And it made it made the paper over and over and over and over again. We had town hall meetings talking about, what to do, if the landlord tries to throw you out, what to do, to be prepared for these types of things. And eventually it led to statutory changes on the way, particularly when out-of-state corporations buy up, mobile home parks, what they can do with rent, what they can do with tenant, deposits. So it led to those different changes, So I'm really proud of that because the landlord eventually just said, we're not going to do it. We're just going to keep the tenants as we have, and we're not going to increase the rents or the deposits. And I was like, yay, So that was a really big moment for us, that we took on like this out-of-state corporation and we went in North Dakota. One of the other big things at Legal Aid is that I worked with a lot of domestic violence victims. That's one of my big, I feel like I was accomplishments.
Something that you're really proud of.
I'm really proud of. Yeah, because a lot of the, once you look at victims of domestic violence in North Dakota, people of color, particularly Indigenous women, face 4 times the likelihood of facing a domestic violence issue, where they need a protection order, they need services, they need a little something there, to make them safe, And after realizing that, I ended up writing a grant to, it's a grant for VAWA, which stands for Violence Against Women's Act. And we got funded for $85,000 for Legal Aid did. And that allowed us to hire additional staff. And then we were able to do divorces for domestic violence victims, custody orders for the children. And then we did also protection orders. So I'm particularly very proud of that we were able to do that, because without getting that grant, we weren't able to get me out there to defend them, Yeah.
So in this first part of your career, young lawyer, you see a problem, you put your shoes on the pavement to get it solved.
Yeah, right.
And I don't know, it sounds like that would be really scary. It doesn't sound like something most lawyers do. As an attorney, I don't know many people who, really put themselves out there and find those sorts of creative solutions.
I don't know. I just saw it and I said, this needs to be fixed.
Right. That didn't cross your mind. It was, here's the problem. I'm going to fix it.
Yeah. I just, I would go off, and I just believe that, and I believe that people are good. I believe in my community, and I believe that's what I truly believe, that our community is made up of really good people, and I think they would step up if they had to, and that's why I think I step up, when I have to.
And you've done so many other cool things in your career that I do really want to talk about, but I just feel like, what's coming to mind now is these people that you started your career assisting, these tenants in this mobile home, these domestic violence victims seeking help with their family law issues. Sure. Those are the sorts of people that potentially would be coming through the court before you. I mentioned earlier that Huma is running for Branch 1 of the Dane County Circuit Court.
Right.
And that could directly impact exactly the sorts of people that you've spent your career assisting. Right.
80% of, this is a civil docket, 80% of that work of the civil docket is family law based. That's divorces, custodies, protection orders. I think another 10% of that docket, typically, I'm just saying typically, is some housing cases. I think I'd be involved with tenants, housing, and then the remaining 10% that the court actually sees might be personal injury, auto accidents, some constitutional claims.
And 80% being family law. I think it's probably pretty well known that in America we have, say, 50% of marriages ending in divorce. So this could actually will impact people we all know personally,
Yes.
whether it's ourselves going through a divorce
Right.
or whether it is someone that we love, our neighbor or something.
Right.
Someone like that, someone who's going through those situations.
Yes. And then when you're going through a divorce, I mean, it's one of the times that's most uncertain in your life. I mean, I don't think anyone who's gone through a divorce can say that, you know, whether or not, even if it was an amicable divorce, that it was an easy process, you know, that it's like, you know, I mean, the emotions are high on both sides, you know. And when I've done this, when I've been a judge before, the big thing is to calm things down, you know, and to try to look at it in terms of what's the best, and particularly in Wisconsin, what's the best for those kids.
You said you were a judge. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So at the time, I was working with, you know, legal aid. I was going to different tribes. You know, I was going to the 3 different tribes. Right. And then one of the tribes was called Turtle Mountain Band of Ojibwe. And they had received, the Turtle Mountain Community College had received a grant through Senator Dorgan's office to work with UC Berkeley and UND Law School to try to create an Indians into Law program, because each of the tribes have a court system. But the fact of the matter is that there's not enough attorneys that live in those areas so that their court systems are not functioning. So, well, they're functioning, but they're not functioning with their own perspective. So the idea was that if we could train their own people with, you know, issues of criminal law, civil law, then they could be their own advocates, you know, they could be their own attorneys in their court systems, teach them on the net at that time, you know, criminal law, criminal procedure, legal research and writing, the same, you know, courses that you'd get in law school, basically.
And none of these people have gone to law school.
None of these
You're
people have
teaching them
gone
from scratch.
teaching them from scratch. You know, how to write a brief. You know, what are the main parts. You know,
Right.
so that's what I was doing to try, and we ended up creating different books, federal Indian law books on different procedures, and at the same time, when I was at that tribe, the tribal courthouse burned down, and then all the judges that were there had left. And I was already working with the college. And so the tribe said, well, Huma, could you help us rebuild this court? Because the federal government is threatening to withhold funding for our federal court because, I mean, for our court system, because the courthouse burnt down. And, you know, now...
The best time to lose funding,
yeah,
really.
Yeah, right, you know. So I was like, okay, sure, you know, I'll see what I can do, you know. So I looked at it. I worked with the clerks and I worked with the indigenous people there, you know, and we were taking out files. We were like reconstructing, like, okay. So we had to create we looked at how are we going to create this system. And the statutes that were in place had a trial court and had an appellate court. So I was the Chief Justice of the appellate court. So I was working to try to create a system of how are we going to have a court of appeals that's going to review the trial court level, but keep the sovereignty of the indigenous people, you know? So before, the appellate court was all just, you know, law professors and people who come from a white perspective. And, you know, so my whole idea is that if I'm the Chief Justice, I'm from India, right? You know, I mean, I think a lot of people just kind of went with me because they thought I was from a tribe, but maybe not this tribe, but maybe from Arizona or something. But I really wanted it to be their tribe, you know? So I made sure that every law professor was an indigenous person. And so then it was a 3-judge panel. It was an indigenous law professor, myself, and then a community member from that tribe. So every judicial order had a 3-judge, you know, panel reviewing that. And then the best part about it is that we made all of our appellate court orders public. So it's all out there. You can go to Turtle Mountain Community College now. You can see, I think I have 50 or 70 published opinions. And now they're even quoted in federal Indian law textbooks. You know, they're quoted in other cases, you know, now. So it's really nice to see something that you did there, that you built that, you know, being quoted in federal Indian law textbooks. and the best part, and the reason why I wanted those court orders public as much as possible is because I wanted the tribe to be able to see, like, if you're having a housing issue, you're going to come to the appellate court. What's required? Okay, so, back in 2005, this happened. And okay, they required to see the lease. They required to see, proof that you paid the lease, that type of thing, proof that, did the landlord, keep the premise, habitable, what are the things that they would, require if you're coming to see that particular type of case. And I think that transparency builds trust in the community, builds trust in the judicial system. And one of the things that I'm most proud about besides that is that we got the courts. I mean, there used to be a backlog where, you would wait, years. Nobody would know when your appellate court hearing was. So we developed procedures as to, like we got the court moving and it was moving and we cleared up all of the backlog that was in place. And we produced, the court produced an annual report to the federal government, which listed out, okay, this year we had 50 cases. Out of the 50 cases, we had this many or 100 cases. And, we had so many family law cases. We had so many housing court cases. And the length of time for these cases to be processed were about this much time. The length of time to be for this was about this much time. So that just objective facts or, data, we also, let that report go to the local tribal newspaper, and they published that report. So it's just building trust in these areas that, the system is working for people who didn't have that clarity before,
right. And it sounds so powerful that you did that, because this is a way of making sure that people feel empowered to enter these courtrooms. Right. And to have their voice heard. Right. To understand that the things that are happening here, they're not just these abstract court proceedings that have nothing to do with you. These are places where your voice should be heard. Right. And where you should be able to hear what's happening and have
ownership. Yeah, because that's the thing, that these courts, they were, okay, in indigenous courts, obviously they didn't have the Anglo system court. Each tribe has their own, oral traditions, but the federal government put these court systems on them, to you're going to function like this is what we expect out of you for due process. We expect an Anglo sort of court out of you. And then it was up to each tribe to develop their own court system based upon those guidances, and it's important that each tribe, for example, like the Turtle Mountain Band of Ojibwe that I worked with, that they have ownership, that they believe that tribe, that court is their court, and if they're going to resolve a dispute, it's going to happen in that court, and they're going to get a fair decision out of that because they can see the process happening.
And these court cases, just recapping, we're talking about class action lawsuits of tenants in these mobile home parks. We're talking about people going through really the worst times of their lives in these family law issues.
Family law issues, domestic violence issues, car accidents. Some of the tribal courts can handle misdemeanor violations.
And these are for the most part, as far as your civil work, doing those divorces, doing work with mobile homes, or in the tribal court system, you're handling these cases that have really they could not have more direct impact because every case has its parties and you're deciding the lives of one to however many people. But also as an attorney, these court cases that we bring to court, sometimes they can affect even greater policy change. Right. They don't just affect these parties, the immediate community. Right. I know that you've seen, just knowing about your career, how what we start here at the ground level in a trial court, it can create bigger change.
It can create bigger change. That was one of the things that, after my husband, was able to adjust his status because I'm a U.S. citizen, and he did his time. We decided at that time we have 2 kids. You know, where are we going to move to? And we loved Madison, so we came here because we thought, you know, growing up in like a rural southern town where I was the other, I didn't want my kids to have that experience. After that, I worked at the law school at the Great Lakes Indian Law Center. And that was one of the places I took all of that background in creating court systems, you know, to the University of Wisconsin at the Great Lakes Indian Law Center. And I was mentoring law students at the time. And at the time, it was Judge Abrahamson. He was the Chief Justice of the Wisconsin Supreme Court. We weren't invited to participate. Judge Abrahamson was wanting to develop a rule of court that would give what's called full faith or credit. And then Judge Abrahamson and myself had a really great conversation. It was like a 30-minute conversation about how should tribal courts operate and how should state courts operate. Like, for example, if you have a custody issue, you know, you have one party runs to the state court, the other party runs to tribal court. Which one should control a family law issue with divorce, you know? So we had a great conversation about, you know, full faith and credit. And after that conversation, I received at the Great Lakes Indian Law Center received a request to produce written argument, produce a written paper. Asked us for, you know, if you have any other written arguments, please present them to the court. So, you know, I was like, yay! So I wrote up a paper just explaining how I think this should go. It's the Great Lakes Indian Law Center, and on this topic called full faith and credit, and we presented it to the Wisconsin Supreme Court.
And real quick, can you just briefly describe what full faith and credit means?
Sure. The full faith and credit was what Shirley Aberson was saying, was basically saying that if the tribe issues a family law order saying this belongs, the child has custody, the child custody placement will be with the mom. Now, that order should be upheld in the state of Wisconsin, okay? Because of, you know, so that's what full faith and credit means, is that we're giving full faith and credit to tribal court orders, just like if they came from, like, if this was Minnesota, you know, in Minnesota, if one party is from Minnesota and they have a divorce in Minnesota, we give full faith and credit saying we're going to uphold that custody order here in Wisconsin.
Right.
Okay?
So you write this additional argument in support of giving the tribal courts
full faith and custody.
And what came of that? What happened after
Well,
that?
after that, the Supreme Court passed a rule of court, and that was in effect for many years with Shirley Abrahamson. Then the court turned to more conservative, and the more conservative justices were trying to withdraw that rule of court,
and because the rule of court said we're giving full faith and credit.
And so it had been in play. Yeah. This you know, allowing tribes to have full faith and credit of their tribal court orders for many years, for probably 5 years before the court switched. And then at that time, I believe the legislature picked it up, and now there's a statute that codifies full faith and credit that what we were talking about in 2007 into Wisconsin statutory law that came from that topic, you know?
Yeah, so you supported this policy that created change in the court system, and then now it's in the statute, so it's black letter law.
It is
the
black
court
letter
has
law.
to follow it.
Yes.
The Supreme Court can't issue a new rule that would change
No,
it.
Wisconsin passes a law that sets it in stone.
Yeah. Bring this back around to where you are currently in your career.
Yeah.
You are an immigration attorney. You have been for how long now?
Let's see, about 16, 17 years.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
so you've seen a lot of changes in that time too.
Yeah. Because I mean, I started immigration when I had, when I had my youngest son. He was, at the time I was working for Ho Chunk Nation, and I was running all over Wisconsin defending, the court, defending them and writing, legislation for them. And at a certain time, I just thought about it and I thought, I really would like to do, basically, I really would like to find my own Indians, because I'd like to do something that, besides for indigenous people, I'd like to, do something for my own Indians, the immigrants, like for people who look, more like me, and so I thought about it, and I got more and more interested in immigration law. And so at the time, I stopped working for Ho-Chunk Nation, and I've been doing immigration for the last 15 years at Madison Immigration Law, representing people who are unseen, unheard. And immigration spans a full variety of it intersects a variety of different cases, family law, criminal cases. It intersects like employment law, it intersects quite a few of different intersections.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you've been doing that for quite some time. And now you're looking to make a really big change in your career again.
Yeah, right.
So tell me about that. What made you inspired to seek the bench?
Well, I think when times are hard, I think one of the things is that I feel like we have to stand up. Like, when under the Trump administration won, we saw him pass the travel ban, if you remember that. Okay. At that time, I was just going along with my practice. I thought things were normal. And then the travel ban came along saying, these 5 countries will not be allowed because they're Muslim countries. And he made a lot of statements. And I thought, this is the time to stand up. So that was under Trump 1. And then under Trump 2, it was really kind of shocking because the escalation of that, I thought, well, we'll have something like this. But the amount of escalation, the targeting in the last year, I saw people that were, here one day, gone another. We saw federal troops in Washington, D.C., Chicago. We saw the Twin Cities. We saw people just being kidnapped by the federal government. And the more and more I think about it, there's not a whole lot I can do at the federal immigration law sector. And then if we look at what's happening with the Supreme Court, the protections that are being weakened, everything that we are here in the last 100 years, my ability to be a lawyer, my ability to vote, my dad's ability to be a U.S. citizen, your ability to be a U.S. citizen, only came in the last 100 years because of Supreme Court cases.
Right. The ability for my parents to even have me.
Yes.
Being, a mixed race.
A mixed race couple, the Loving case. Right. And again, by the way, birthright citizenship is on the docket in the U.S. Supreme Court this summer. They will be looking at birthright citizenship. That means that you may not be a citizen if they do to what they did to Roe to what they're doing, what they did to Roe to this case. It's very scary.
And so many of these protections that you're mentioning, these really important things that we just hold to be natural parts of our lives, they exist because of Supreme Court decisions.
They exist because of Supreme Court cases. And so when I'm thinking about this and I'm thinking about what could come down the pike and what I'm seeing, I thought, oh my God, we have to have, the way that I thought is that only what we're going to have is if that erodes, if in the 3 to 5 years ahead of us, the Supreme Court really erodes these protections on individual rights, all we're going to have is this Dane County Circuit Courts. And I thought, I can't change anything up here in the federal government, but what I can do here in Dane County is to be a judge for all of us, to be a judge for everyone who's feeling targeted, everyone who is feeling, that their voice doesn't matter. I can be that judge for them, and I can stand in the way of the federal government, because under our state constitution, we have protections under the state constitution, a platform for all of us to be safe here.
Right. Because if these federal protections go away, we're looking at the state court.
That's all we're going to have.
Sent back to the states. In Wisconsin, what we're looking at is the Wisconsin Constitution.
Right.
Which the application of that starts in a place like
like the trial court, like the
Yeah.
Dane County Circuit Court.
Right.
And so that is why I'm running. I feel like these protections have to be in place because what's coming down the pike, what I see coming down the pike is, you think Roe v. Wade was scary. Just imagine what they do to that citizenship, the rights of U.S. born people. They could take away your citizenship and say, well, you are no longer a U.S. citizen because of whatever reason, So that's creating a two-class system in America. And if you think about our court systems, like the Dane County court systems, everything we are is part of that court system. When we are born, we get a birth certificate that comes from the court system. When we fall in love, we get married. That, you get a marriage certificate. When you fall out of love and you hate your husband, you get, or your husband hates the wife, you get a divorce order, When you die, you get, go through estate planning. All of that, our whole lives come from the court system. And so I think representing our lives in the court systems matter, who we are matters. And the fact that, and I firmly believe that our court systems are owned by us as people, and I think this is a time for all of us to stand up and say our court systems are owned by us, that this Dane County court is all that we're going to really have. And the question is who do you want leading it when the federal government comes in,
Right. And I know from previous conversations, you have some really interesting ideas for how to implement laws, even aside from these issues with the federal court potentially taking away its protections and having to interpret Wisconsin constitutional law. There are ways that we can support the community also through how cases are run through the circuit court. Why don't you tell me about that?
Yeah, I know there's a lot of people really concerned about ICE coming into the courtrooms. The thing there is that one of the protections that I would do, for particularly if people are undocumented, is that one, I would require all law enforcement officers that are in my court to come and be unmasked, be able to provide their name, their badge number on the record, and what they're there for. If they're coming into my courtroom, I want to know what is your basis to enter my courtroom. And I would want to see that they had judicial warrants. I would want to see those things in the record. Okay, that's one of the things that I would want. I would also allow people to, if they are feeling scared, to appear by Zoom or other methods. And then the other thing that I would like to see happen is I'm the only candidate in this race that is calling for a rule of court, an actual rule of court from the Wisconsin Supreme Court to activate a rule of court saying, what is the procedure when ICE comes in? We should have a rule of court saying if ICE is allowed, where are they allowed in our court systems? And if they're not allowed, what do we expect? Like, for example, I would call on a rule saying that if ICE enters a courtroom, they should only enter a courtroom when they have a judicial warrant signed by a judge.
And then also, going back again through your career, you've done so much to just help people in really difficult times of their lives.
Right.
And as an attorney, you're doing the advocacy. As a judge, you would have another level of power to affect change and apply the law in a way that can really positively impact the community.
Right. The trial court judge, many people don't understand this, but the trial court judge at Dane County has the most discretion. When you talk about the basic purpose of the trial court judge is to make sure that we have a clear administrative record. And I think that is the most important thing that I can do, is to make sure that the record of all of these cases is clear, and have everything be transparent. Because as an appeal, like if someone doesn't like my ruling, they would have to appeal it. Now, the appellate court and the Wisconsin Supreme Court, you think they have ultimate power because they're the Supreme Court. But basically, when you go up on appeal, the courts can only hear the appeal as brought forth by the attorneys. But as the trial court level, that's where you want to make sure that all arguments are put forth.
So that if you see someone forgetting or declining to argue something that should be argued, a way of protecting their client that they're missing.
Yeah, so I can, just make sure that both sides, that is the ultimate judge, the ultimate responsibility of judge, is that fairness is advocated for both sides, that we have a fair judicial system, and that is the crux. And a part of that, as a trial court judge, you control what evidence comes in, you control what witnesses come in, you control courtroom decorum, what's allowed in, and I think all of those things have that discretionary power is the most out of all three branches. The trial court judge has the most power for discretion.
Yeah, because you control who is in your court, what are they saying, what laws are coming into your court potentially, what facts, what evidence, so much. Yeah. And that is something that...
And that's shaping the case. And so when each side has an appeal, that their appeals are shaped from the trial court administrative record.
Yeah. And... when it comes to these people who are coming to court, they're going through evictions, they're going through divorces. I mean, ultimately, the purpose of the court is to resolve these issues. Right. And different judges do that in very different ways. Right. And I think that you have some really unique ideas about how you would like to do that.
I'd like to, some of the things that I see that I'm really inspired by is Judge Mitchell's drug court. I think, for example, I'd like to bring in, I don't know exactly how, but I'd like to bring in some of his ideas of, for example, tenant evictions. For example, if you're not paying your rent, something has happened there, either you've lost your job, you have a mental health issue, alcohol addiction issues. So I'd like to bring in some of this social work aspect into the housing claims, because because that's the first time, we have to think of our courts beyond just these issues. I think we have to get to the people behind the issues. So if you're not paying your rent, something may have happened, and I would like to bring in some of these social work principles that Judge Mitchell is bringing in with the drug court into housing, into tenant evictions, because if you get evicted from a residential eviction, you're talking about the loss of your stability. You're talking about the loss for your kids of their school system. Where you live is determined where you go to school. So if you're evicted from your apartment, you're basically evicted from your school system as well.
Right. And even if you are a landlord, you would also have a vested interest in making sure these people are supported, because this person who's not paying rent, if they're evicted, that problem doesn't
that
stop.
problem doesn't go away.
Unless we address it.
Exactly. So those are some of the things that I'd like to bring in, is this idea of, maybe because when they come in, that might be the first time that they're coming in, that they're experiencing either this trauma or loss of, there might be ways that we can incorporate, Department of Workforce Development, social services, some sort of mechanism so that they can get the help that they need, so that they can stay in their maybe their apartment, but also get the help that they need to address their addiction, their mental health issue, the loss of their job. That's the real reason behind the eviction.
Right. Yeah. Just making sure that these people are supported and don't lose their homes. Making sure also, again, if you're the person who's doing the eviction, helping you recognize what can you do for your community, but also, if nothing else, this is a win-win for everyone.
Yes, right. So these are some of the things that I'm kind of interested in. Another aspect of things that I'm interested in, I was reading on the Day's website, according to their study, only 34% of domestic violence protection orders are issued in Dane County. I'll be honest, I don't know why that is. And that's one of the issues that I'd like to research and find out. Is it because of the lack of service? Is it because something wasn't put right. I mean, what it seems very low. Only 34% of, and those are particularly women. I mean, if you look at domestic violence issues, those are predominantly women and children that are running from situations that are violent.
Yeah, and what you're saying is, out of 100 cases where people are looking to the court for protection,
only 34 of them are granted.
76 are
not granted.
They have to find some
other way.
Thing to do.
And I don't know why that is, and I'm not saying that's good. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying that seems kind of low, and as a judge, I would look into that, how do we make it more fair? Because I think that's the role of the judge is to make the whole court system fair for everyone, not just a few people, but to make sure that it's serving the people,
And again, maybe in these cases where no protection order is issued, what else can the court do?
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
Connect the community
to connect connect them. So those are some of the things that I'm very interested in, and like I said, I'm running to make sure that our court serves the people. I fundamentally believe that people in Dane County are great. We all know that. But I think our courts need to serve the people, and I believe that our courts are elected by the people, and all of us in Dane County have a vested interest in our courts working as efficiently, as effectively as possible. And I think that's what this election is about. It's about saying that, we can't change everything up there, but if, the federal government, if ICE, if we're being targeted, we can make our local court system as strong as possible to defend, like, as they say, what is it in football? A good offense is a good defense.
Okay.
Yeah, something,
yes.
There's a statement.
The best offense is a good defense.
Yes, the best offense is a good defense. So if we have a good defense is what I'm thinking of creating in the Dane County court system.
Right. And it's, I think, such a shame that people don't realize how much their vote can matter on these grassroots levels.
Right.
Because it can be so hopeless to think, I can't change a presidential election.
Yeah.
Who cares who I want to have in the U.S. Senate to represent me?
Right.
But the court, this is someone who you could see on the streets deciding cases for people you live with, for the people around you.
Your neighbors will be coming to this court for divorces, custodies, housing issues, car accidents. The court represents all of us, and I think that's what it should. And I think at this time when we're feeling particularly vulnerable, I really feel like this is a hopeful message, and I feel like this is a time when I want to show all of us, particularly as immigrants, particularly as people who have been the other in communities, that we are Americans. We are Americans, and we're Americans, and we deserve to serve. We are leaders. We are part of this community, and it takes all of us to build this community, to say everyone is welcomed here, to build this type of community. And that's what I hope to do with this campaign.
That's really exciting and really powerful. And I'm so proud to see just another member of our community, speaking as an Asian person. Right. Again, Asian being a very broad term.
Yes, right.
But, someone who doesn't necessarily meet the status quo.
Right.
Making your voice heard, making our voices heard, and really making sure that the court is a space where people feel like they're represented.
Yes, and it has to be, and we have to take ownership. We have climbed through all the different hoops, like if you want to be a doctor, we're there. Engineering, we have climbed through all of these different hoops. Right. And we just don't have a lot of us on the bench. I think there's maybe 2 possibly in the whole state, Asian people in the whole state of Wisconsin. And I think, our voices matter. We matter. We're Americans. And we, and what this grassroots effort is that I really want to show my kids, because my younger kids that are like 23, 21, they are really scared to death. My girls are scared to death that, their body autonomy is going to be taken away. My son is like 16. He's worried that he's going to be picked up just based on the color of his skin.
Right.
Someone might just say he's deportable. He might get kidnapped, or just he might,
And someone in the circuit court, they have so much power just by virtue of their position to, yes, enact the law, interpret it, consider the facts, but also make sure that the people they're serving are supported.
Right. And represent this community, And that's what I'm hoping to do. Is I'm hoping to say that this campaign is a positive one. This campaign represents all of us. And I think we all deserve positive change in our court system.
Yeah. And with this position representing so many people, I mean, you've served all of these various parts of our society. And so you've heard all of those, those perspectives. And yeah, it's, I think, just, again, really inspiring to see someone so passionate.
And I think that, if the Supreme Court does what I think it's going to do in the next 3 to 5 years, all we're going to have is this Dane County court system to protect us, And it's like, who is going to stand up for that? Who's going to stand up for protections? They talk about, we have to be smart in terms of how we write our judicial orders. We have states' rights. They always talk about states' rights. Well, let's talk about states' rights. Let's talk about our rights of La Follette. Let's talk about the Hmong community. Let's talk about the Ho-Chunk Nation who was here before. Let's talk about the Ojibwe culture, which talks about 7 generations. When they plan for laws, they plan for 7 generations. All of this is precedent. All of this is our part and parcel of our states' rights. So let's talk about that in terms of states' rights when we talk about our Wisconsin Constitution.
And when we're interpreting this Constitution, thinking about what is the world in which this thing was written? What is it supposed to say? What is it trying to do?
And how have we evolved in this community in Wisconsin? And that's what our Wisconsin Constitution stands for. And that's what our courts are here to uphold.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
Are there any last things you would like to share?
Well, this is a grassroots effort. It started about 6 to 8 months ago with 6 to 8 women that are my neighbors. My website is developed by my neighbor's 16-year-old son. And so it is truly grassroots. All of my communication is done through my other neighbor. So if you'd like, you can go to Huma for Judge and check us out and find out more information. But the election is April 7th. Early voting starts May 17th, and every vote counts. Your vote matters. It matters. Who you are matters. This election matters. Our court systems matter. So please get out there and vote. Find friends. Talk about this election because it does matter. Our local court systems matter.
Right. And you said early voting starts May 17th. You meant March.
Oh, sorry.
March 17th.
March 17th.
St. Patrick's Day.
Yes.
Mark that on your calendar. Not only is it a day to celebrate Irish heritage, but also get in your vote and make sure that you're heard.
Yes. It's March 17th. They accept absentee voting. March 24th is the first day of in-person voting, and April 7th is the last day you can vote. So definitely get out there and vote. It's going to be this is going to be a historic election. If I am elected, I would be the first Muslim American judge anywhere in the state of Wisconsin. So it is particularly poignant for all of us who are being targeted, all of us who are different, and it is an uplifting campaign. And I'm happy to be involved.
Well, thank you again so much for sharing. And hopefully for everyone listening, if you didn't before, you can understand why this election is so important. Maybe you barely even know what a circuit court does, but hopefully now you feel inspired to learn a little bit more about it and why your vote really matters in this upcoming election.